to life.
Amen.
Should have only wonderful good life. L'chaim. We welcome Michael from Germany and Tim from Texas. Thank you for joining. Okay. Oh. All right. So freedom is something that we all cherish, something that is important to all of us. Losing freedom, not something we want. And that's where we're coming to, the holiday of freedom, the holiday of Pesach. So if we look for the definition of freedom, though, from a Western perspective, as opposed to a Jewish perspective. So if you look up, you're going to see the word freedom. One definition would be the absence of subjugation to foreign domination or despotic government. Second definition is going to be a state of not being imprisoned or enslaved. And the third definition is a power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. Now, many people fight and die for this freedom, which, has a positive value to it, right? That we can be free to express ourselves if we want as Jews, or if we want, in any manner that we so choose. Let's understand freedom from a Jewish perspective. How do we look at it? Is there a different perspective than perhaps, Webster's dictionary? So when we look at the Exodus, when we look at the story of going out of Egypt, we see something interesting that's quoted in the Haggadah. Let me get it up over here on our screen. We'll share it. All right, there we go. Text number 1, brought to you from Yecheskel, from the prophet Yecheskel, but it's actually something that's quoted in the Haggadah. And as for your birth, on the day you were born, your navel was not cut, neither were you washed with water for cleansing, nor were you salted, nor swaddled at all. No, I pitied you enough to do for you any of those, to have mercy on you. And you were cast on the open field in the loathsomeness of your body on the day you were born. And I have passed by you and saw that you were downtrodden with your blood. And I said to you, with your blood live. And I said to you, with your blood live. Myriads like plants of the field, I have made you, and have increased and grown, and you have come with perfect beauty, for as fashion with your hair grown, but you were naked and bare. And I passed by you and saw you, and behold, your time was the time of love. And I spread my skirt over you, and I covered your nakedness, and I swore to you, and came into the covenant with me, says the Lord, and you were mine. And I washed you with water, and I rinsed your blood off, and I anointed you with oil, and I clothed you in embroidered garments, and I shod you with skin of the badger, and I girded you with the fine linen, and I covered you with silk. So there's a lot here, which we're not going to go into all of the finer details here, which are very interesting. But the important point over here is that this is considered the day you were born, the day of the Exodus, right? Washing you is immersing in the mikvah, blood is the blood of the bris milah, of the covenant, making a bris, the blood of the bringing an animal as a sacrifice, and so on, right? But the main point over here, it's the day of your birth. Text number 2, Rashi explains, on the day you were born, when I chose you in Egypt, you were entirely bare. Because of the Exodus as compared to birth, the verse relates the various stages of caring for a newborn. So simply put, the Jewish people left Egypt a newborn baby. And then, we matured, we grew, and so on, into a great nation. So what does that mean exactly? How do we understand that what do you mean we born into a new nation? Weren't we a nation beforehand? Didn't Yaakov and his sons move to Egypt, more than 2 centuries earlier? And they thrived there as a nation in Goshen. So much so we had our own culture. We had our own dress code. We had our own language. Isn't that a definition of a nation? Quebec doesn't even have that. The only thing Quebec has is a language. And they want to call themselves a nation. We had a culture that was unique. Well, okay, maybe there's a Quebec culture, I guess. A language and a dress code. But yet, what are we saying? No. The birth of a people is from the Exodus. How do we understand that? And this is again from the book of Dvarim, quoted in the Haggadah. And you shall call out and say before the Lord your God, the Armenian or Aramean, referring to, sought to destroy my forefather, and he went down to Egypt and sojourned there with their small number of people. And there he became a great, mighty, and numerous nation. The Haggadah itself says we became a nation. And the Egyptians treated us cruelly and afflicted us and imposed hard labor upon us. So we cried out to the Lord, our God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our voice and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. And the Lord brought us out from Egypt with a strong hand, with an outstretched arm, with great awe and signs and wonders. And he brought us to a place, and he gave us the land of flowing of milk and honey. So here we are praising God that, our forefather Yaakov went into Egypt, a small number, but became a great nation over there. Not only great, mighty, numerous. So what does it mean that we became first a nation when we went out of Egypt? How do we understand that? So obviously there's something more to being a nation than having a culture. There's something more, or at least from a Jewish perspective. Non-Jewish perspective, different story. But from a Jewish perspective, something a lot more to being a nation than having your culture, having your language, and having a land even. We're reborn spiritually. We become a brand new entity. As the Rebbe says in this week's Sikha, the Exodus is referred to in Ezekiel's prophecy as a birth of the Jewish people. The reason is it is called a birth is because the Jewish people became a new entity. So of course we need to understand, what is that new entity? How do we understand that? What does it mean? Again, juxtapose the fact that we were a nation already in Egypt. And not only were we a nation in Egypt already, we say it in the Haggadah. So this is not something new. Any questions so far? Great. Okay, let me just see any questions here. Okay. So we need to understand this concept of freedom, which we gave definition before, right? And to understand freedom, What do you need to understand? Slavery, the opposite of freedom, right? How do you appreciate, day? When you understand what night is, when you have the context, when you have the contrast, right? That will help us. So slavery, is one thing that you that you have to be subjugated and to do something. But in that slavery that you're doing something, there can be some feeling of an accomplishment, of doing something. Now, of course, if you're in a slave labor camp for the Nazis, that's a different story because you don't want to help them, right? But if you're enslaved by the king, right, to build a pyramid, whoa, look at the pyramid we built, right? Yes, maybe I'd rather be doing something different, but there's still something. But what does it say about the slavery of the Jewish people? It says it was avodas perach. It was backbreaking labor, is how we translate it. But what that really means is, as our sages say in the Talmud, is that they would exchange the responsibilities of men and women, giving the work to men, women's work to men, and men's work to women. Now, back in the day when there was a clear delineation between men and women, right? Welcome, Irma. Thank you for joining. There was a clear delineation between a man and a woman, right, and their roles. Then when you give the man the woman's role, it becomes very against their nature, right? And it's backbreaking then. It might have been an easier job, but it's not something you're accustomed to. And likewise, the opposite way around. For women getting a man's job, something they're not accustomed to. In other words, not within their nature, within their their natural talent, shall we say. And this is the kind of enslavement that the Jewish people had. In another way, we could say it, to bring this idea across. A guy was in a forced labor camp, and he was grinding by a mill every day, working at long hours. But, he figured at least he's grinding the wheat, and he's going to help many people that they'll have what to eat. So, that gave him a little strength. That gave him a little a push to do the very harsh labor. But his subjugators were very cruel. And one day they show him that on the other side of the wall, there was no mill. All he had was the wheel that he was turning and turning and turning. And he was turning and accomplishing absolutely nothing. That's called backbreaking, because it's senseless, useless. Backbreaking, at least, you're feeding somebody. Okay. I don't want to do this. Okay. But I'm subjugated to do, but at least there's a sense of a purpose. There's a sense of meaning. There's a sense of an accomplishment. And here, when he sees this, he faints. Like all this time that he's been working for absolutely nothing. So slavery is this idea of kind of on the physical level. On the physical level means going against your nature, as the men do the women's jobs and the women do the men's job. But on a spiritual level, there's also the idea of slavery. In other words, you're doing something that is contrary to your spiritual nature, right? And therefore, you can't really self-actualize yourself because it's against what your natural nature is. And that's what happened in Egypt. The idolatry in Egypt that consumes the Jew spiritually is also something, so to speak, against their nature. So not only they do physical work that is against their nature, but the spiritual environment that they were absorbed in with the idolatry that was so commonplace, so much so that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he had to pray to stop any of the plagues, he had to leave the city limits, because in the city, anything and everything was engaged and part of idolatry, right? So there was no way to self-actualize. Okay. So now what is freedom? So slavery is like something that is not just you're subjugated and it's not the ultimate idea of slavery. It's not merely that you're subjugated and you gotta, you can't do what you want, but you're doing something that's totally, entirely against your nature, right? I mean, your nature is to be wild and free, right? We're going beyond that. You want to be wild and free and you don't want to be subjugated, of course, right? You want to do whatever you want. Get that. But here's even deeper. The subjugation is totally against anything of your character and your being. Women get men's jobs, men get women's jobs. That's on the physical level. On the spiritual level, they're consumed by idolatry around them. So on a spiritual level, they can't be themselves either because of the idolatry that consumes them. Is that clear? So freedom then from slavery is then not just about freedom from, that I could, now I could do whatever I want. That's not real freedom, because that's only freedom that expresses itself. That's only freedom that expresses itself in what I can do. But there's a deeper freedom of an identity, freedom that I could self-actualize myself, freedom and self-actualize myself, like a man doing a man's job, right? And that I could be free with my true identity. Free not to do, but free to be. Is that clear? So with this, then we can understand something interesting. Let's second, let me get it front over here. Oops. Okay, here we are. So you have in front of you text number 8. When Hashem speaks to Moshe to anoint him as the redeemer of the Jewish people, but Moshe says to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should take the children of Israel out of Egypt?" And God says to him, "For I will be with you, and this is a sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you take the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. So, obvious question is, if freedom is just freedom from able to express myself, freedom that someone isn't going to subjugate myself, right? Then why would we add over here to worship God on this mountain? Remember, at the beginning of the class, we gave three Webster's definitions of freedom. Just to remind you, what do we say freedom is? Absence of subjugation, not being imprisoned or enslaved, the power to act the way I want to. Well, if that's what it is, then just let my people go. Is that clear? The issue. If the whole point of freedom is that I'm not subjugated by a foreign domination, foreign power, I'm not imprisoned, right? Excuse me a moment. Hello. I'm not imprisoned, enslaved, and I have the power to do what I want. Well, then just let my people go. But the end of the verse says, in order that they should worship me on the mountain. Freedom was not meant to be merely Webster's definition. Freedom is to be able to live in sync with your purpose. So now we understand that when the enslavement wasn't mere enslavement, but backbreaking, avodas perach, right? It was about trying to not live with your nature, with your purpose. Purpose in the physical, in the sense of a difference between a man and a woman, and in the spiritual sense of the idolatry that they were absorbed into in the Egyptian culture. Freedom is to remove ourselves from that we can live in sync with a divine purpose, that we would receive the Torah of Mount Sinai. And with this, then we can understand when our sages speak in the following manner. Pirkei Avos, it says, Rabbi Yeshua, the son of Levi, said, the verse states that the tablets are the work of God and the writing of God's writing engraved in the tablets. Read not engraved charut, but liberty cherut. For there is no free individual except for one who occupies themselves with Torah study. So what is the Mishnah saying here in Pirkei Avos? Freedom doesn't mean that you could choose to do what you want. That's not what freedom is. Freedom is that I have to study Torah. I live by the dictates of Torah. So the Exodus isn't a freedom that now I could go and, play golf on a sunny day, but it's a recognition that I can be and must be who I am, what I truly am, in my very being. And this is what the Rebbe explains here in the Sikha. One who neglects the Torah and mitzvahs might appear liberated without a yoke upon them. Why? Because they can do whatever they want. So I'm free. It seems like an easier way to live than keeping the Torah and mitzvahs. But because this neglecting the Torah, God forbid, runs contrary to the Jews' very identity, ultimately it is a form of backbreaking labor. Only when one serves God can one truly be free. In other words, what is the notion that we're saying over here? Freedom for the Jew, the Exodus from Egypt, is bound up in the fact that we get the Torah. And the Torah becomes our marching orders, becomes our guide in life, and it becomes our true freedom by following its way. In other words, we're wired in such a manner by God that the Torah is a part of who and what we are. So when we're talking about freedom, it's freedom to be, not freedom to merely act. Actions is not a true sense of freedom. I can stand up now, I could sit down now, like, I could go here, I could go there. Why is that not true freedom? Because animals can do that too. So to be free like an animal, that I can roam wherever I want to go, it's not real freedom. That's the distinction between an animal kingdom and vegetation. Vegetation isn't free to move. They're implanted, and for them to grow, they need to stay where they're planted in order that they can properly grow and be fruit-bearing tree, for example. And it fulfills its purpose that way. The uniqueness of the animal kingdom is movement. They have movement. But that's the uniqueness of the animal kingdom. So if we had freedom of movement, that only makes us as good as an animal. Now, to make us human would be freedom maybe of expression, that I could be free to give my communist ideas or my socialist ideas or my capitalist ideas, right? And we all have freedom of expression, as in, United States Declaration of Independence and, the First Amendment or Second Amendment, whichever one. I think it's second, if I'm not mistaken. Some Americans, please let us know. It doesn't matter.
And freedom of choice, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, but that's human freedom. That's not Jewish freedom. Because our freedom is free to be. Who are we? Jews. First Amendment, Linda tells me. Okay, thank you. Right? To be, that's who we are. And that's what we're free to be. As opposed to, as the Rebbe says, backbreaking labor. In other words, for a Jew not to be living a Jewish life based on Torah and mitzvahs means that they're doing something contrary to their nature. Now, where do we get this connection between the Exodus and Shavuos, which is the time of giving of the Torah? Right? The verse does tell us, right? Hashem did tell Moshe Rabbeinu, take the people out and bring them to serve me at this mountain, Har Sinai, right? So that's clearly stated there, but it goes even more so. Every holiday has a date given to it in the Torah, right? Rosh Hashanah is the first day of Tishrei. Yom Kippur is the 10th. Clearly says in the Torah. Sukkot is the 15th, right? Everybody familiar. And Pesach is also the 15th of the month of Nisan. Anybody know what Torah says about Shavuos, which day of the month it is in Sivan? Anybody know? Anyone want to stab a guess? Doesn't say. It says 49 days later, counting the Omer on the 50th, it will be the holiday of Shavuos. Why? It's because Shavuos is not an independent holiday of its own. It's completely the culmination of Pesach. Let my people go. I remember when I was a kid, I went with placards protesting. My father, Alav Shalom, Coach Segan, when he came to Parliament Hill in Toronto, when we're out there, let my people go. They forgot the rest of the verse, in order that they should serve me on the mountain. Exodus from Egypt, Pesach, its culmination is 49 days later, Shavuos. Is that clear? Any questions so far? So what do we have clarity on? Slavery, right, was unique for the Jewish people because it was backbreaking, meaning against our nature, physically and in a spiritual sense too, right? Freedom is the opposite, that it shouldn't be backbreaking. In other words, not against your nature. Freedom means be in sync with your nature. Your nature is that you're going out of Egypt in order to serve God. Pesach is linked with Shavuos, that we get the Torah. The Torah becomes our guide in life. It becomes our marching orders to fulfill the purpose that we were created for. So freedom means to be in sync with that purpose, right? Like the guy who was in the labor camp and he's grinding away, that wheel is pounding away at the wheel, and then he finds that there's nothing on the other side. How devastating it was. Why? Because the nature of a human being, they want to feel purposeful, even if you're enslaved. Even in slavery, you can have purpose. And to do something so purposeless is against the nature of a human being. He faints because of that. So we have a nature. We have something that is who and what we are. Serve God through Torah and mitzvahs. Now with this, we can understand the concept of birth. Why the Exodus is called a birth. I remember we had that question that, what do you mean? Is that considered a birth of a nation when in fact we were a nation in Egypt already? But what kind of nation were we? What kind of nation were we? A nation with a culture, with a language, with a dress code. Maybe like other nations. But we weren't. The Jewish people, in the uniqueness of the Jewish people, until Mount Sinai, when the Torah is given to us. The Rebbe explains in the Sikha, the birth of the Jewish people is about becoming a Torah nation. A whole identity of Jews and of an individual Jew is Torah. The reason there is a new identity is not just because in Egypt they were at such a lowly spiritual place and they weren't able to appreciate the Torah. And in fact, as long as they were in the 49 gates of impurity in Egypt, their spiritual state opposed Torah and holiness. Rather, it's not for that reason, because then they are such a low level. Rather, it's mainly because Torah is a nursling beside him of God. It is his delight every day. Torah is it's God's thing. It's his delight. And the hidden treasure that was concealed by you, by God conceals that hidden treasure of Torah. It completely transcends the created realm. And therefore, it was something entirely new for the Jewish people when they were in Egypt, completely out of their former league. In other words, Torah is this new entity. Torah is this new thing that is of God. It's his delight. And until we gain this new identity of birthing, becoming a new nation, we're not capable of having this gift. Mount Sinai, we become converts. Even Moshe Rabbeinu, the holy Moshe Rabbeinu, is considered like a convert at Mount Sinai. Why? Because at Mount Sinai we became a new identity as a Jew. Our Judaism will not be based on language. Our Judaism will not be based on dress, on culture. It will be based on the neshama that's given to us. It will be based on the Torah that is part and parcel of this new identity. And therefore, everybody converts. Everybody converts at Mount Sinai and becomes Jewish. That's why conversion process, by the way, is such a serious thing. And someone that converts, and it's a conversion it's a metamorphosis of soul. It's not taking upon yourself a commitment to Jewish lifestyle. That's what you need to do in order that you'll have the metamorphosis of soul, that you'll have the complete new identity of being a complete birth. This is a birth. You're a new person through conversion. That's why if it's not done according to Jewish law, it's meaningless. Well-intended can be, and it can be you are extremely maybe observant. But observance isn't what makes you Jewish. It's the neshama that makes you Jewish, that's given to you at Mount Sinai. So that's the birth of the Jewish person and the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. Even Moshe Rabbeinu becomes this new being. Now, and Torah then becomes the way to express that new being. Right? So Torah is not just a guide in how to lead my life, but it is how to self-actualize who really what I am. It's not just a spiritual, beautiful practice that, gives me a connection to God. It's deeper than that. It allows me to be me. It allows me to be free. It allows me to free to be who I am. Is that clear? Let's add something to this. Yeah, thank you, Davida. Very powerful it is. The holiday of Pesach is the holiday of Pesach, the holiday itself has 3 different names. Biblically, it's called Chag HaMatzos, the holiday of matzah. Rabbinically, it's called Zman Cherusenu, the time of our freedom. Where do we see that? The men of the Great Assembly who put together the Siddur in the davening on Pesach, the name of the holiday is Zman Cherusenu. Right, that's sort of the rabbinic name. Then the name that sort of accepted, and it's also brought down in rabbinic sources, right? But the name that we, in fact, call it is more the people's name, Chag HaPesach, Passover holiday, right? So Rebbe explains interesting. In order to have freedom, and freedom to be, right? Not freedom of. There's freedom from slavery, but there's freedom to something, right? And that's the uniqueness of the Jewish people that doesn't exist anywhere else. The rest of the world, freedom is freedom from. And that's let my people go, right? Freedom from. Take them out of slavery. But as the verses God says to Moshe Rabbeinu, in order that they should serve me on the mountain. In others, it's from freedom to be this new identity of, a convert, birth, which is the concept of birth, right? And now that you can be free to self-actualize in who you really are as a Jew. So here's the order is of these three names: biblical, rabbinic, and then I guess call it the people's choice, if you will. Right? Chag HaMatzos, Zman Cherusenu, and Chag HaPesach, holiday of Matzah, the holiday of freedom, and then Pesach. So Rebbe explains like this, tying in with the idea that what ultimately is Pesach, freedom to be. So freedom to be the Jew that we are, the first thing you need is the holiday of Matzah. Why? Because what does Matzah represent? Self-abnegation, bittul. To be able to be free to be, I first have to be able to set aside my notion of freedom. I have to set aside my notion of purpose. I have to set aside the way I perceive things, because that will limit me, won't allow me to be free. But then I can come from there to Zman Cherusenu, a time of our freedom. Free that I can express who I really am. Because without the bittul, the self-abnegation, right? Self-abnegation meaning, because, we all have a animal soul that has desires, has lusts, and wants to define, freedom, and freedom what I want. Freedom what I want. Well, that needs to be negated. And then I can be free. The second name of the holiday is Zman Cherusenu, is to be free to choose something deeper within me. I won't be enslaved by my animal soul, but I'll be able to be free then to choose the true, deeper definition of who I am. And then that will lead us to Chag HaPesach. Pesach coming from the word Passover, as God passed over the Jewish homes, meaning to skip, meaning that will lead me to transcendence. When I am capable of putting aside my notion and becoming then free to see the true inner me and to connect with that, that will give me a capability of skipping, transcending my human condition, and to be, have a power in this world that is awesome. So here you have the three names of Pesach, how they all tie in with this notion of what Pesach ultimately is. Questions? Any thoughts, comments? Nothing. Powerful idea. I hope I brought it clearly. I hope I didn't, because it's yeah.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Andrew, please.
So we only got our godly soul when we were given the Torah?
Yeah.
And before that, what did our founding fathers have and mothers? They didn't have a godly soul?
They didn't have it. They didn't have it the way we have it. that it is our, you see, it's a great question, Andrew, but it's a paradox, complete paradox. As we learned in Tanya, as you know very well, as our godly soul is in the merit of our patriarchs, right? The merit of them, of our forefathers and foremothers, we merit because of them. They were great, and because of their greatness, we merit to have such a soul they didn't have in the completion that we have it. So they have the merit, but they don't really have it. It was only given at Mount Sinai. What better proof do you want to the notion that Moshe Rabbeinu, who's greater than even Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, he himself becomes a Gersh in his Gayer. He becomes a convert that converts, right? So he becomes a convert. So if he becomes a convert, what does that mean? He didn't have that? No, because it didn't, before that, the soul didn't ascribe it wasn't a description of you. What you did in your spiritual quest was what defines you. So Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, their spiritual quest, they were defined, in a very holy way, because in every fiber of their being was a spiritual quest to be connected to God. So it was their achievement, but their achievement is, in the end, minimized by the fact that it is human achievement. Not a fault to them. It's not like there's no fault here, right? Just this is the fact. Now, what we have, it's not our achievement, that we have this unique Jewish soul that is implanted in us that, you're born with it. It doesn't matter, it does matter what you do with it, right? That you, again, the point we made over here is backbreaking work means against your character. So it's one thing of a character of, the woman now has to, grind the wheel, and that that's not what she's accustomed to, right? Here we're talking about going completely against your nature. Your nature is that of a Jew to do Torah and mitzvahs. So when you don't do it, you're going completely against what your inborn nature of your soul is. That didn't happen before Mount Sinai. That's unique. That's why it's called a birth, right? Remember, we had the question. We were a nation before. We say Nagada. But what kind of nation were we? It wasn't infused our soul to our very being. It wasn't imprinted on my very being. If I was committed to the Jewish path, the path of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and I followed them, and so, it was a part of my life. And therefore, that's the idea of that, the fact that they had a culture, they had a language, they had a dress code, they kept the Jewish names and so on. Wonderful. But that's not saying that it was their Jewishness, their neshama, their soul is the very core of their being, was it? That's unique by Matan Torah. Why? Because that's the power of Torah, that it too is the defining feature of our neshama. Torah and mitzvahs, right? It's the defining feature of our neshama. And therefore, adherence to it is being truly free. That's what the birth of going out of Egypt produced. And the beauty now, what we just explained, is we see it in the three names. Chag HaMatzos, matzah representing self-abnegation, bittul. The idea of putting aside any exterior notion of selfhood, free to do, freedom of choice, right? Put that all aside. in order to have Zman Cherusenu, the next name, true freedom. It's freedom not from, but freedom to be, serving Hashem. Come to the mountain and serve. And that then ultimately brings us that we are not defined by the human condition. We pass over it. We skip it. That's the power that's given to us as a result. And that, explains the miracle of the Jew, that we're still here. We're only here by virtue of our connection and commitment to Torah and mitzvahs. That's the only reason. Does that make sense? That clear, very powerful, beautiful idea.
But then is our Jewish soul, our neshama, given on Mount Sinai, the same as the godly soul? And isn't then the godly soul, isn't that what you are born with? You are created in the image of God. Does not everyone have a godly soul? Or is it just Jews get it at Sinai?
Excellent question, Celia. So, only Jews have a Jewish soul. Actually, a convert, the term convert is Gershin is Gayer, a convert that converts. How does a convert convert? It's just say a non-Jew. There's no such thing as a non-Jew that converts. The non-Jew that converted, they are called a convert that converted, meaning because they had a spark of Jewishness in them. But Jewishness is not a spark, it's a flame. It's a flame. So that flame, the non-Jew or the convert doesn't have. They have the spark. They have to go through a process of a flintstone that you're going to rub hard because it is, it's a harsh process in order that you can come up with a flame of a Jewish soul, right? So, so the Jew has a Jewish soul that we call a godly soul that is in merits of our forebears, right? But and that is not, that's called a part of God, that soul. What a non-Jew has is a soul that's created in the image of God. It's in the image. It's not a part of.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I remember reading
It's
that.
not a part of. It's the image of the divine. Now, which means just like the divine, God is, is one and unique and special. Likewise, every soul that's created in the image of God, as opposed to animals that are not, have a purpose, a unique purpose, and they are to be treated with divine respect because of the image that is upon them. Now, that and as a result, that that there's a sanctity to life as a result because of that image of God. The world doesn't really confer sanctity to human life as an end in itself, but there's value to life. Here we're saying it's got a sanctity because of the divine image, but that's not a Jewish soul. Jewish soul is different. We're not going to get into that conversation now. We did that in many different places in Tanya, in chapters 18 and 19. We did that in chapters 32 and many other places, many other times. But but that's the basic distinction between the souls. Any other questions or comments? Great questions. Great comments.
Rabbi Frank, can I ask some questions?
Absolutely.
Well, Andrew and Celia left the bar high, so.
Sorry?
Celia and Andrew left the bar high, so I hope my questions measure up to theirs.
Go ahead.
But the first one I wanted to ask was, is it when we follow our animal soul, is that like a self-imposed slavery? And the second question I wanted to ask is, when Mashiach comes, is that when we're truly free?
When we will what?
I'm sorry. The first question was.
No, I got the first question. I got. I didn't get the second.
Okay. The second question is, when Mashiach comes, will that be when we are truly free?
Excellent questions. So yes, when we follow our animal instincts, so we're not free, right? Because we're acting on autopilot, we're following our lower self, and that's not our true self, right? It is, it's that element in me that I need to overcome, and to be able to live with and be guided by my godly soul, to be inspired by that and not by my animal soul. So yes, that would be an enslavement. And when Mashiach will come, then we'll be truly free. Absolutely. Because how do we explain freedom? Who could give me the couple of words that we said? This is a test. I want you all to pass. So I want you all to give me the answer. Type it up or say it.
Freedom to be our true selves.
Thank you, Leah. Freedom to be our true selves. Again, let's knock out of our heads what we think freedom is. Freedom from, right? Freedom from subjugation of a foreign power. Freedom from being subjugated to someone else's whims, right? Freedom to act as I choose, right? That's not Jewish concept of freedom. By the way, we don't fight for that and die for that. That's so not Jewish. Because even when they will not allow me in communist Russia freedom to act as a Jew, what do? I go underground and act like a Jew. Right? That's what you do. You're going to die for not giving me freedom? That's not freedom. So I don't have freedom of gathering publicly and being and acting as a Jew. So I'm going to fight. Well, first of all, you ain't going to fight Stalin's. You're going to fight him in the gulag, right? And so you don't fight for that. We fight for freedom to be. You're going to not allow me to be? That I'm going to fight for. To be a Jew? So with the pandemic here in Quebec in particular, there's a lot of, it's here, Canadians are not like Americans. Americans live free or die, Anybody from New Hampshire, right? I'm sure many people have that on their license plate, even though they're not from New Hampshire, it's just, but Canadians are very socialized in a way that, that they don't start up with anybody, just, for good or for bad. And so we have over here curfew. I got to go home soon. Otherwise I'm in trouble, but I'll blame it on you guys. The Americans, look what they made me do. No, God forbid. Just kidding. So, but we work with it. The last year, I haven't been shackled. I've been, no doubt, I just came from a wedding. First wedding in over a year that I went to, performed it for one of our, actually he's come to the classes here, Jason. He's come recently, hasn't been, but coming to our classes.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Rabbi.
Yeah. I got married, and why am I mentioning about that? Oh, because of the miracle. So I told him, I promised him, you start keeping Shabbos, you're going to find, and you're going to get married. So pandemic forced it. He kept Shabbos. He found a wonderful girl, Shomer Shabbos, from a wonderful, amazing family. Complete commitment, unbelievable. So as I said, the pandemic, yes, there's certain things we can't do because of it, but that means we're not free? Just because there's a curfew? What do you mean you're not free? You're free to be. You're, here, by the way, freedom comes for the dogs, because after curfew, you can take out your dog, but human can't go, right? But freedom isn't movement. Freedom is a freedom of assembly. Freedom is not freedom that I could, espouse my ism. That's not what freedom is for a Jew. Freedom to be. So I have in the past year been busier and had been more being a Jew, a shliach, than ever before. Because the rest is not the true reality. Now that sometimes, listen, I'm human like the rest of us, and sometimes it gets you down or this or that, but like not really, because it's not my reality. That's not my. I don't choose that as my reality. Well, I can't go on vacation. I mean, I wasn't able to go to the oil of the Rebbe. That was, and
Yeah, I missed that. I usually go 4 or 5 times a year, but I haven't gone.
Yeah. So Andrew, share with
Yeah.
me a secret if we can keep it between us.
I'm saying I haven't. I would go 4 or 5 times a year. I
I
haven't.
know, so I want to share with you a secret.
Oh, okay.
I just went.
Yeah, the shlichim were telling me, yeah, go.
So I just went. I went as I went in and out literally within 24 hours, and I went commercial, so I didn't have to quarantine as a result. I did it legally, the way I could do it legally, and I went. So that was something, that, but that's because of, and even then, if I wouldn't, can I still be a chassid of the Rebbe? Can I still be a shliach? Of course, but as a child wants to be connected to their parent, so I wanted to get to come and visit.
I think it's his 119th birthday, isn't it, on Wednesday?
Yeah.
Is this right?
Yeah. Wednesday, exactly. Tuesday night, Wednesday. Yeah.
So we read fulfilling 119, 120. We read.
Yeah, we go from 119 right from to 120 exactly. So the again, so what are we saying over here? This is a very powerful. What world do we want to choose to live in? What's our reality? And is our reality freedom from or freedom to be? Freedom to be, that's a choice we have every moment. We could be a Jew. We could be serving Hashem. We could be doing a mitzvah. We could be learning Torah. We could be reaching out to somebody, whatever. The list goes on and on, of course, of all the Torah mitzvahs that we can fulfill. This is the focus. This is what true freedom is. And this is what Chag HaMatzah is. The only way we get there is if we have that, like matzah represents nullification, bittul, to be able to put aside my notion, the external notion, to come to the true cherus, the true freedom, zman cherusenu, that I'm truly free to be, and that will give me the power to pass over, to skip, to be transcendent. And indeed, that's who we are as a people, a transcendent people. And that's the uniqueness of the fact that we have that birth of getting that godly soul that's imprinted, defining us of who and what we are uniquely as the Jewish people. Any questions, any comments?
So can I go back to the soul for a minute? Can you classify the soul and say that for non-Jews, they have nefesh and ruach, but they don't have neshama? and Jews have nefesh and ruah, and I think there's 5 parts of the soul. They have more, including neshama.
Good question.
Would that be accurate?
Not precisely, no. What they have is a nefesh hamaskelis. They have an intellectual soul. They don't have just an animal soul, but they have an intellectual soul. The intellectual soul is in the divine image of God. That it can know right from wrong. It can know truth from falsehood, from the power of the intelligent soul that we have. And that makes a difference between a human being, of course, and an animal. That an animal, there is no right and wrong. There is no intelligence that can come to that appreciation and understanding. So that's what a non-Jew has created in the image of God. Jew has, again, as we explained. But you see, that gives them the power to connect to God in choosing the right path over the wrong path. It doesn't give them an imprinted identity of being like a Jew, right? And being a part of, and that is a part imprinted on our very core and being. So it's different, but we're going to leave it at that because it's,
Thank you.
we can discuss on it. So that's the basic idea.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? You guys are great. Amazing. So a reminder, Pesach is coming, by the way, just in case you didn't realize. Thursday night, we have to check for chametz. We have to sell our chametz. Make sure you sell your chametz. Very important. You can go online to do that, or you do it by your rabbi, a Chabad rabbi in your area. Make sure you have shmura matzah for your Pesach Seder. At least for the Seders, you have to have shmura matzah. Very important. And make sure you start your Seder at night. Nighttime here in Montreal starts at 8:01 or 8:02. Before that, it's called making whatever. It's not making the Seder. Making the Seder is not because the kids, you want to keep them up, and you can't start at 8 o'clock. It's kind of late, so you start at 6 o'clock, but that's daytime. It's not the night of Pesach. So very important to make sure that we do things appropriately. We've been giving some classes on that. Please join us for our My Yeshiva every day, noon to 1:30. We'll learn more about Pesach and so on and so forth. Folks, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi Fine. That was
That
great.
was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. God bless you all. If I don't speak to you or see you. Next Sunday, we won't have a class. I just realized that for the next 2 Sundays, there's no class.
Right.
Because it's Yom
Right.
Tov.
Right.
So it will resume in, in 2 weeks, right?
In April.
3 weeks. In 3 weeks.
Yeah.
3 weeks. Oh my gosh. Okay, but that doesn't mean you don't learn Torah. So you come noon times, to learn. And God willing.
Noon times you're going to have Torah?
Every day, noon in my yeshiva, right? Every day at noon.
You will continue having that?
I mean, this week we're going to have,
this week.
there'll be with the holiday. I don't know where we'll have to figure out the schedule. We'll keep you posted.
Okay,
All
thanks.
right. God bless you all. Be well. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.